Hello, welcome to a Spiritual Ascension, my 5-year journey. I'm telling my entire story of my 5-year ascension journey from April 2020 to April 2025 and kind of beyond a little bit. But it kind of was exactly 5 years. If you're just coming into this, you're kind of maybe get lost. So I just kind of recommend that you go back to the introduction. It says intro video and start there and then work your way forward. Okay. Because I'm telling my entire story in chronological order. Okay. So when I left off, I was kind of giving you some details of a day in a life in a shelter. And as I told you, it had been predicted. um, when was that? 2017, 2018? And this was now 2022. So I'm going to say 4 or 5 years. It had been predicted. Someone actually telling me that you're going to do work with um, homeless women. And I had no idea what that meant. But 4 or 5 years later, I found myself in a shelter. And again, please go back and listen to the entire story so you'll understand exactly how I landed there. Um, I think about it too now. Oops, I forgot to put my time on. Sorry. Because I'll end up rambling and just like talking way too much. So I kind of like to time myself. Um, I think in the last um, video, I kind of was all over the place, kind of saying, what life was like. And um, I know I was protected. And I always say, whatever you go through on your journey, you're always going to be protected. So I was never afraid that someone within the shelter was going to do me harm. There was a couple instances where a couple of women did try to come at me because they didn't know how to take me too. And as one of my videos says, like a couple of people said, like, you don't belong here. But like I said, anyone can end up in a shelter. It doesn't really matter who they are or what their status is. When I first got there at end of September, so let me try to go more since I kind of gave you a basis of day-to-day life. Let me kind of give you more of a chronological what happened. So I landed there at the end of September. Um, the first month, kind of they give you a little bit of leeway because a lot of people may have been in abusive situations or whatever it may be. So they give you a little bit of time to kind of get now acclimated because you're now in the system, right? Um, you have to take classes or a class, I should say, on like how to write your resume and how to present yourself at an interview and hold a job, get a job, so forth and so on. And I don't know if that's a 6-week course or something like that. Um, and that was the social services office was about a 10-minute walk away. So I started attending that in probably, I don't know if it was about 3 or 4 weeks after I first got there. I'm trying to think of how one of the women, the instructors there, I think actually recommended me for a job that was also within the vicinity um, for the Department of Housing for the state. And it was a temporary position. So kind of you can leave anytime you wanted to. And so I ended up getting that job. And I think you could only work so many hours on, I think it was 30 hours. And also, since you're receiving benefits, if once you start, um, which is a big controversy right now, as far as, I think with the government kind of reconsidering who should receive benefits, if people have been taking advantage of benefits, um, have been on there for too long. If you're making money while you're receiving benefits and so forth. So since I was now getting a paycheck, I had to kind of know that I had to save my money in order to eventually leave, because, or else save up enough to be placed in an apartment. I thought I was going to live somewhere around there. So I'm saying, okay, well, maybe I'll probably try to get a room in a house, rent a room or something like that, just to get out of the shelter. So let me save up enough money to do that. There's so many programs as far as them getting you on Section 8 and I didn't want to hook myself into anything like that because I still knew that like I told you, that I was told by my father in spirit to say, you need to go to the New Hampshire, Maine border. And I knew in my mind, I didn't know how I was going to get there or when I was going to get there, but I knew that was part of my purpose, was to eventually go to the New Hampshire, Maine border. And I'm saying, if I'm kind of hooked into an apartment on Section 8, the state kind of has me. So I didn't want to get kind of too enveloped in that. All the women were going up to the Section 8 office and signing up and said, oh, Marilyn, you're going to go up too. And I said, well, I felt kind of pressured because I'm like saying, at that time, I was still learning how to listen to my intuition, listen to the divine on what direction to take. So anyway, I started on this part-time job, working for the state Department of Housing. Very interesting. I think if I had a choice, like, would it be something I would want to um, do? Maybe. It was pretty interesting, just to see that some of the things that people go through, because it's hard. It is extremely hard. And just saying too that there's so many benefits out there. You think you can't get by, that you're at your worst, that there is something out there for you. Also, I know I wanted to say that there was a pantry nearby. No, not a pantry. What was this? It was they would serve lunch every day, Monday through Friday. Um, I think only for maybe an hour and a half, maybe, or 2 hours, maybe it was like 11 to 1 or something like that. And if you went there 11 to 1, no questions asked, you could have, have a job, you know, have employment. If you just showed there, they would provide you with food. So it might be sandwiches, a piece of fruit, a bottle of water, whatever. And people would donate food to them. But while I was attending the classes, that was nearby. So I would walk over there and get my lunch and then go back to the class. So just these things that are out here that people have such beautiful hearts that are providing these services. And I always say, like, one day, like, I want to really give back to, and be able to donate, to some of these people who provide for like the homeless. Or it was, I remember just seeing a couple, older couple drove in, went up to the counter and they got their lunch and they went back and, got in their car and, it was for anyone. There was no questions asked. You just stood there and got your meal and whatever you decided to do. So I always wondered why I was chosen, right, to have this experience of um, being in a homeless shelter. And all my life, I never had any issues with, oh, I always had, I never had to worry about not having. And possibly that was a part of it. I don't know what my thinking was before I came here to say that you need to experience this in this lifetime, um, to be in the circumstance where you're in a homeless shelter, that you have to receive benefits, that you're dependent on someone else for money and food and shelter and health care and so forth. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Uh, I actually ended up finding oh, I know. They also want you to, well, you don't have to, but they would like you to get some kind of training, job training. So I had an appointment with one of the women in that department, and she kind of said, well, you already kind of have a degree and everything. And, what else would you like to study? And, I always had an interest, like I wanted to start like, I had done the yoga and I was kind of through with that because everything had fallen apart. I was so upset, about that. And I wanted to kind of leave that behind. I was always interested in doing pottery. And I said to her, I said, I don't know, but from looking at my resume and everything, like, what do you think I should do? And she says, I think you need to like pursue more accounting because I already have a business degree and with a concentration on accounting. So she pointed out like the QuickBooks certification. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds good. So I did that. It was through the um, big college in New Jersey, if you know which one that is. And so I got a certification in QuickBooks and did that online for like the next month or 5 weeks or something like that. And then I ended up getting a job at a company that was about a 25-minute walk from the shelter. And um, as a staff accountant. And I think that having that certification kind of helped to push me, to the forward of the line. And so I was hired. And I think I only had to work 30 hours too when I wanted to work part-time, because if I were to work full-time too, that was another thing with my benefits at that time, not knowing where I was going to end up. Um, let's see, how much time do I have? Okay, let me make it a little faster. So this video might go a little longer because I want to finish up this portion of the journey. So I ended up working there, I think the start of January. I quit the, job at the housing department and I started working at this other job. It was for a sporting goods company. Um, as a staff accountant, and the financial manager was, really good at first. He said, I'll teach you whatever you don't know and so forth. And it was good because now I was able to do some walking back and forth every day to work. And I felt empowered again because I was doing a job that I liked, that I had chosen to do. I was able to now really save up more money and had a good amount of money between the housing job and this job um, saved. So now this is January. And as I told you about in the former video about this young girl who had come to the shelter, and her and I became really tight. And about she had been really hustling to secure housing, and she ended up getting a affordable housing apartment. And the beginning of January, she ended up moving in. I was so happy for her, so excited. And I was like, but she left. And I was like she was like my, partner in crime there, not crime, but you know what I'm saying. And now I felt so alone, that she was gone. And I was like, when's my time? And I also said, I know I'm not, like, I didn't feel like I should be getting a house or apartment, like some kind of established place in that vicinity, because it didn't feel right to stay there. It just didn't, like, my intuition was kicking in, like, I don't feel like I'm supposed to stay here. So, what had happened? Something triggered me that day. I don't know what it was. There was so much happening within the shelter that wasn't good. I know this doesn't happen in a lot of shelters, but there was bad things going on. And one of the assistant director or whatever was having a relationship with one of the residents and like having sex in one of the offices and stuff like that. And she wouldn't leave. She had been there. You're only really supposed to be there for a certain time. She didn't want to leave because she didn't want to leave him. Any new girl that came in, she got really defensive. Even she did that with me because it's like, is he going to like her, more than me? And she got in fights with other people, and it was just a big mess. And I'm saying, like, nobody else sees this, that this is going on in here. And the director who I had first met, kind of said hi to when I first got there, she totally snubbed me the whole time I was there. She met with so many other residents and everything. I know she had seen my resume, saw my work history, but she kind of like stuck her nose up at me. Um, I'm trying to think. Something was telling me to get ready. And I think I told you guys in one of my videos, it may have not been here, that one of my signs, like I always say, look for whatever your signs are. But right before my son passed away, um, I started getting headaches, and they would last for about 4 or 5 days, like really severe headaches. And I had got one of those headaches like that. And I said, something's going to happen. There's going to be, I had gone for a walk too. And if you guys have been listening to, whenever I see deer, that means movement is going to happen. I had gone for a walk and I saw a deer. And I said, okay, something, it's time for me to go. And things as calm as things could be within a shelter, they had been for me anyway. Other people had had fights and arguments and everything like that, but things had stayed calm for me. But things started to kind of heat up where people were kind of not attacking me, but I could feel the energy that it wasn't feeling good anymore. I can't remember what triggered me that one day, but I said, I came home from work, or came home, came back to the shelter, and I laid on my bunk. And that evening, we were supposed to all gather for one of those little classes we have monthly. Somebody comes in and kind of talks to us about, our mental health or whatever it may be. And I didn't want to go. And I had always gone, like, if you don't go, you get marked off, and so many marks off, you could get kicked out of the shelter. And I didn't want to go. And I know I had always followed all the rules. And I got a new roommate, and she was kind of getting on my last nerves at that point. And I had, over the last couple of days, had started to kind of get my stuff together because I felt like it was time to go. Yeah, this is kind of going over. I'm going to finish up in a minute. And I just got up off my bunk and went, gathered all my stuff, packed everything up. By that time, it seemed like I had a lot of stuff. I had only been in there exactly 4 months. I stayed 4 months from the end of November to now it was the end of January. I didn't know where I was going to go. I had researched nearby hotels that were kind of cheap, decent, but on the cheaper end. And there was one in the next town over. So I ordered an Uber and I started taking my stuff downstairs. And the director who was there on duty came out and she's like, "Oh, are you checking out?" And I said, "No, I'm just leaving." Because if you check out, like check yourself out, then you got to fill out all this paperwork and everything. And I refused because I kind of started really leaning into her. I said, "I've been here for 4 months. You've never ever approached me to say, how am I doing? Do I need anything?" So forth and so on. I said, "You allow your assistant director here to have sex with the residents in offices." And I just went on and was saying all the things that had been happening within the shelter that she kind of turned a blind eye to. And even on one of my first checks had come from my housing job. They had opened my mail and then kind of said, "Oh, it was open when it got here." And just all these different really weird and bad things were starting to happen. And that's how I knew too, it was time to go. I called an Uber. I got one of the bigger trucks, put my stuff in it, and I left. I went to the hotel and took all my stuff in, and just there was this just big sigh of release that I was finally actually on my own, for the first time in almost 3 years. First time that I had my own space for almost 3 years. So I'm gonna leave it there. I don't want to go too much longer because this one's a long one, but that was a really dramatic day. And that's only the start. We're coming up now on um, 3 years almost. It was the end of January. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for being here and listening to my story. If you would like to talk to me about your own story, there's a link below to book time with me. Um, there's also courses I have on the ascension process. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.